Hey guys, today is the day I review the final book that I somewhat recently-ish checked out at my local library. The book is Volume 1 of The Manhattan Projects, written by Jonathan Hickman and drawn by Nick Pitarra. This book collects the first 5 issues of this series. My initial reaction to this is, wow, that was really something. It is almost entirely unique and innovative. I've seen some comic book stories that verge near the same territory that is treaded by this book, but none of them do exactly what this volume does. For example, The Five Fists of Science is also a story that utilizes fictional versions of historical figures involved in madcap supernatural adventures. But when it is measured up to this story, it falls very short in terms of scope. In fact, after 5 issues that we get in this book, I feel like I only just read the prologue to something massive that will still be building in preparation to the big finish 50 issues from now. Whereas The Five Fists of Science was all a standalone story in less than 200 pages. Then you've also got something like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is a pretty massive alternate universe with hundreds of years of timeline put down on paper. But one issue I eventually had with the League books was the timeline itself. By putting all of these events in the back of a book, you are trapping yourself in the events that are laid out before you, with no room to breathe or change direction if you decide that you don't like where the story is going. Manhattan Projects is different because it only provides us with little snippets of the future of this world in the form of quick little text pieces. And while the snippets do give us some idea of where this is going, it certainly seems to me that Hickman has given himself a vague enough roadmap that he can still change course if he so likes. For example, we are told that an artificial intelligence version of FDR becomes the secret leader of the United States shortly after the real FDR dies. This gives us some idea of the shape of the world that will follow in the decades after the events of this book, but it doesn't lock in the events Hickman might want to play with, just in case he decides that the story is and should be malleable. We also get something like how a spaceship left the solar system in 1997 never to return. This tells us something, but nothing that really air quotes spoils the destination the architect of the story has in mind for us. So that's enough of me comparing this book to other books and how it is not like them. What is this book if it is not The Five Fists of Science or The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? Well, the general premise is that various people from the real world, such as Robert Oppenheimer, Albert Einstein, Richard Feynman, and Wernher von Braun, all work together in a very secret underground project to build weird and fantastical weapons for the U.S. government. The construction of the atomic bomb was used as a front to cover up the air quotes real stuff this group was involved with. In the course of these 5 issues, we get to see the recruitment of Robert Oppenheimer, who is not what he seems, a side quest from Albert Einstein, who is also not what he seems, and the slaughter of an entire species that wants something from the people of Earth. Now, it is definitely an interesting premise that allows for many different stories to be told. Pick any historical scientist or science-adjacent person from history and find something weird and interesting to do with them and throw them into the story. Check. Throw in parallel dimensions and aliens. Check. Lots of weird and wonderful stuff going on here, and I can easily see lots more weird and wonderful stuff going on, especially if Hickman does decide to move significantly further into the future, which seems to be hinted at in these text pieces. So while it's a wonderfully fertile premise that can provide lots of stories, I am not entirely sure what I have read after 5 issues. Maybe things become much clearer as the series progresses, and I am at fault for trying to judge what I've read when I've only read 5 issues. Now this is where my own personal biases toward the way comic books air quotes should be comes in. But by golly, there was a time when you could buy a comic book and get a complete story. And for a pretty decent price too. But now, if you pay almost $4 for less than 30 pages of comic, you get a fraction of the story. Or in this case, I've read this book that collects 5 entire issues, and I still feel like I'm getting a fraction of the story. That is not my problem. That is a problem with this series. It does not matter if the rest of the series is fantastic. If I cannot make heads or tails of what exactly is going on here, then I have no reason to want to read any further. And that disappoints me because this sounds like something that was absolutely made for me. I love the concept of this thing, but it is the execution that kind of drives me insane. Maybe I should say something nice so I don't feel like I'm being too harsh here. The art is simply heavenly. It reminds me a great deal of Geof Darrow, Frank Quitely, and the late Seth Fisher. Very stylized, and it's entirely possible that you would not like it if you saw it, but I definitely did. I want to see this guy do many different kinds of comic books, and I want to read all of them. And there are some really hilarious moments in this book. I assume that the humor is only magnified if you are familiar with the history and these real people, but I don't know who Richard Feynman is or anything beyond superficial details about Harry S. Truman, but I still found moments involving these characters to be laugh-out-loud funny, which is definitely a plus. But overall, I think over the course of wording this review out, I've realized where I stand here. There's some wonderful bits about this thing, but I think it's an instance where the pieces are better than the whole. And yeah, there's some more that I didn't exactly care for. There are a few different times when the entire story is interrupted for a flashback scene that ultimately adds absolutely nothing to the overall narrative. Twice we get origins for different characters that I sincerely believe can be skipped, as they provide no insight to the understanding of the overall narrative. And then there's this weird thing where every few pages we get a double spread of blank pages. Sometimes there's a title on the blank pages, sometimes there's not. This was a minor annoyance, as I usually like to see the cover for the issue placed in between two issues in a trade collection so that I can know where I'm at in the book. And if I need to stop reading, it's incredibly easy for me to find a place where I can do so. But in this book, you might come to the end of an issue, then read 2 more pages of what you assume is the next issue, then you get another one of those confounded double spread pages that exist for no reason at all, and then you return to the story. I'm not sure if this is Hickman's doing or Patera's, but it really doesn't add anything that I can tell. But these are just some things that are very minor in comparison to the rest of the things that I talked about in this video. I think it's the lack of any actual forward momentum in almost half a year of comic books that makes me decide that this is a skippable book. It's got some good stuff going on, but the cons definitely outweigh the pros, for me anyway. And like I said, this isn't something that I rejoice in. I had heard some great things about this series, and about Hickman as a writer, but now I'm beginning to think that this gentleman's works are not exactly for me, or at the very least this work isn't. So that was what I thought. I hope I haven't angered too many people with my less than stellar response to this book, and if I haven't angered you, then I hope you will like, share, comment, and subscribe, and come back tomorrow for some other kind of video. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day.